hopefully all of this is working. Can I shut my window? Can you guys hear that? Probably not. Right, okay. So essentially what this is I kind of just wanted to speak to you guys. There's a few things I need to let you know, and basically why I haven't been uploading in the past couple of, God, it must be months. Essentially reason is I've had A-levels. Now anyone from Britain, I think everyone in Britain does them, will basically know what they are. When you reach 18 or you're in your final year of school, you do a bunch of exams in certain subjects or whatever subjects you choose. And yeah, essentially they dictate whether or not you'll get into uni or what uni, because your unis are based off grades. So essentially I've been really busy with that. Now in terms of what this video is, essentially so as a few of you, the people I play with, know, I study philosophy and I study physics and I study maths. And essentially I'm very interested in certain ideas, and one of those is, well, I'll get into what they are later. What this video is essentially going to be is me talking at my camera, at my mic, about certain ideas and what my opinions are, what I think the solution is if it's a problem, or what I think the problem is if I don't know what the solution is. I'm essentially going to leave the camera running and just talk, and there'll be bits which don't make any sense to anyone, including me. So I won't let you guys, or you guys won't want to watch that, so I'll cut those bits. But generally it's not going to be like with images and stuff like that. It's just going to be me talking at this camera. The topic which I actually really wanted to start with was the mind. Now anyone who has studied philosophy basically knows this is completely unsolved. Like no one has any idea. We don't know what the mind is at all. Like we have absolutely no idea. And there's two kind of general, what would you say, general classes of theories. The mind is not at all understood. So there's two classes of theories generally. There's the physicalists or the materialists, which essentially argue that everything in the universe is made of physical matter. And the mind, as it's part of the universe, must also be made of matter. So they're thinking potentially about the brain, and that's where the mind resides, and that's what the mind is. Again, there's problems with this camp of theory as a whole, and then there's more specific problems with each individual theory which comes under it. Then there's a non-physicalist. Descartes was typically known for being, or is probably the typical non-physicalist you'll encounter in your first kind of years studying philosophy. Now, so anyone who studies science like me, or does physics or chemistry, or any empirically minded person, probably looks at non-physical and like, yeah, it's rubbish. It doesn't make any sense. Or there are reasonable reasons behind supporting a non-physicalist view, and it's simply because there are certain things physicalists, I can't pronounce that, physicalists cannot explain. Like, there are certain things which we may be able to in the future, but right now it doesn't even look like we can conceptually conceive of how we could explain them in physicalist terms, and to do with mind and consciousness. I reckon in as neuroscience and psychology develop, we will be able to explain more and more of the mind in physicalist terms. Whether or not we'll ever be able to explain all of it, I don't know. I think we potentially could. I'm very much an advocate for the power of empirical research and science, but that is still up for debate. Anyway, so each of these two groups, they kind of have each kind of have their own problems. And there isn't currently a theory or a sub-theory within each of these groups which actually has solved either of these two problems, or both of them at least. Again, each one has their own, each individual subset of these physicalist and non-physicalist theories have their own problems, but these are the general overall ones. Now, for physicalist theories, the problems are qualia and intent, or they're known as a problem of qualia and a problem of intentionality. So what is qualia? Qualia is supposedly what it is like to be a mind. That's the best way I can put it, quite simply, I guess. If you see an orange, say you see an orange on the table, qualia is what it is like to actually see the orange. So a quale is the color orange. It's not the concept of the color. It's not you thinking, "Ooh, that's an orange." It is literally looking at that and what it's visually like, or what it sounds like, or what it tastes like, or what it smells like, or what it feels like. So pain is a really standard example of qualia. Now, and the reason it's a really standard example is no matter what your philosophical background, you can try and deny the existence of qualia, and people have tried to do that, not many very successfully though. That doesn't help you much when you're in pain. Pain seems to be like this, what would you say, this bedrock that no one can really deny. People have tried, many people have tried, but no one can really do it successfully, because essentially pain is a feeling. So if you're feeling pain, it exists, and there's no greater proof than that. You're feeling pain, and therefore pain exists. You're in pain. That's all it is. No matter what it is in terms of its entity, in terms of its substance, you feel pain, it exists. Now, what explains that pain is nobody knows. But that's qualia, essentially. What it feels like to be a mind, what things look like. Now, intentionality, that's the second general problem for physicalists. Intentionality is essentially the ability of a mind to represent the world. Yes, the ability of mental states or the mind to represent or be about something. When you think, I like cheese, it's about cheese. Or when you picture a field, it's about the field. Now, no other physical objects that we know of have this ability to represent reality in some other way. A potential example is films, but it's not clear that they even do, because essentially they're just light waves, aren't they? But the mind is different. It has this ability to be about something, to represent something. So the problem with qualia is, so now that you know what qualia is, there doesn't seem to be a way to explain qualia in physicalist terms. So the best example I can do, again, is if you visualize something. So you visualize something, you can try and explain it in terms of scientific terms. So light goes into your eye, goes into the visual cortex, and then that somehow neuron transmits in your brain. I don't know how it actually works. And then there's electrical signals in your brain. And you may be very tempted on a quick glance of, well, that is vision. Like that's all vision is. And that's all qualia is, therefore. You can do it for the other senses as well. The problem is at what point do the electrical signals firing in your brain, in the neurons, if that's what it actually is, at what point does, say, C fibers firing turn into the actual qualia that you see? So at what point do electrical signals, which we know have at least some correlation to visual seeing and qualia, at what point do electrical signals turn into the sight of an orange, the actual visual experience? At what point? And it appears, at least for now, that no matter how deeply we look at it under a microscope or how much we examine the brain or the neurons, there is no like screen of there's the image. It's nothing like that. So at what point do these electrical signals turn into a qualia? And physicalist theories don't seem to be able to explain this, simply for that reason. Because when do electron or neuroelectrical signals turn into the vision of an orange? When's that happen? So that's the problem of qualia, and the problem of intentionality is there are no other physical objects in the universe that we've come across that have the ability to represent reality or other physical objects in any way. I mean, we can mold things, but that's not the same. They're not representing. When we think about a field, how can a physical substance or physical property, physical object such as brain, which essentially is just particles and neurons, how can that represent reality? How can that be about something? Now, there were some responses to this which were really unsuccessful. One of them was the brain literally creates a representation of the world, almost like a 3D printer. Yeah, that's just empirically wrong. If you don't know what empirically means, it just basically means in the scientific realm that's just been proven wrong. That doesn't happen. It doesn't create a 3D representation or any other sort of physical representation of the world in any way. So that's off the table. And there are no other real strong... That one's not strong. There aren't any other responses particularly. So that's the problem of qualia and intentionality. Now, for non-physical, I am going to focus on the problems with physicalists because I know, well, basically many people on the internet are materialists and very scientific and atheists, and all there is physical matter, and that's great. But there are some problems with that viewpoint on the world. But I will quickly mention the problems for non-physicalists, and the non-physicalist ones, they're very, very easy to list. The first problem is the problem of interaction. Problem is if something is non-physical, all types of causation that we've come across. This was actually posed by Princess Elizabeth. What was her name? Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia. Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, I think, to Descartes. She wrote him a letter. Now, essentially, what the problem is the best way we can put this is all types of causation we've ever come across have been between two things of like substance. So, strong nuclear force, right, only acts between things which contain quarks. That's the general rule. It only acts between things which contain quarks. So interaction only occurs between two things of like substance. Electromagnetic force only happens between things of charges. So like substance again, which actually depends on quarks, but that's another issue. Causation can only occur between two things of like substance, so between two physical things, and it doesn't seem possible that a non-physical thing could interact with a physical thing. So it doesn't seem conceptually possible that a non-physical thing could cause a physical body to move. say, and if the mind is non-physical, it would have to, because say I'm moving my arm. And a second problem, which is essentially just a whole out attack on non-physicalism as a whole. Essentially, it doesn't explain anything. Like, to say the mind is non-physical, what does that mean? It doesn't actually tell us anything about it. You haven't explained how it works. You haven't explained its nature. It almost seems like this. So you know that argument of when someone questions some things about a religion. I'm not slandering religion as a whole, by the way. It's just they're typical responses which really annoy anyone who ever wants to question these sorts of things. Which is, so why is this the case? And it's God works in mysterious ways. Well, the non-physicalist approach to solving the problem of qualia, intentionality, and consciousness as a whole seems almost like that. It doesn't actually tell us anything. You've just gone, it's non-physical, and that's a supposed but not really a good solution. The bit I want to talk about is and this is where it kind of becomes much more my opinion and my interpretation of certain problems, and I want to focus on the problem of qualia and intentionality. Now, I haven't got a solution for these problems, but one thing I started to suspect is I don't think they are separate issues. I don't think they're separate problems. And the reason I don't think that is, so what is qualia? Qualia is the ability of the mind to visualize certain things or hear certain things, or what it's like to feel in mind, and you can sum that up in senses and emotions. The emotions are kind of the tricky bit. So you've got qualia, right? And then what is intentionality? The ability of the mind to represent objects. How does the mind do this? I'm not talking about in terms of processes which we can empirically observe, or physicist or non-physicist. Like, what if you look at your mind, use introspection. I know tons of people hate introspection, but if you're a visual person, generally when you think thoughts like I like cheese, or you read words, you visualize them in your head. You visualize the letters in your head. So you literally see I like cheese written out. That's a really stupid example, but that's it. If you're a auditory person, you hear it. You hear, I say hear. Hear implies that something else causes your, whatever you're listening to outside of your mind, but it sounds the same. You hear the words I like cheese in some voice. What I've started to notice is that isn't different to qualia. It doesn't seem to be a different capacity of the mind. See, it seems to be employing the same processes as visualization does. The only difference is the cause of these thoughts are internal instead of external. So when you see an orange, the cause, if the physical world actually exists, let's assume it does for now, because that's a horrendous another issue to do with idealism and all that sort of stuff. But if the physical world exists, the cause of that certain vision or that certain sound is outside you. It's that object causing it, or it's that physical process which your senses pick up, and that causes the visualization in your mind. When you're thinking a thought like I like cheese, or you're seeing a field and it's about something, i.e. intentionality, it seems to be an internal cause or something within you. It doesn't seem to be external, because you can visualize a field without being in a field. I can visualize a field right now, and I'm in a room, an inside room, and I can visualize a field, or my thoughts can be about a field. But that's the only difference between the two. The capacity of the mind or the processes seem similar between qualia and intentionality. So I don't think the two are actual separate problems. Now, in terms of what this means in terms of the broader scope, is the mind or the physical theories now only have to solve one thing, and that's essentially, how do we explain in physicalist terms why the mind feels the way it does? You don't have to explain intentionality, because by explaining qualia, you explain intentionality. The only difference is like I said, intentional thoughts such as I like cheese seem to be caused by something internal rather than external. But that's the only difference, and that in itself would be relatively easy to explain, even if the problem of qualia, what should we call it? Problem of qualia intentionality, that's the combination of two, isn't. But the bit of, once we explain one of them, we should be able to explain the other. That's my theory. Yeah, this is actually this whole question of intentionality is one of the reasons I think that there's such confusion about the concept. So there was a whole debate about this whole Chinese mind thing about surrounding, what was it, functionalism, I believe. Yes, functionalism. Yes, it was. And So, John So was one of the huge critics of this, and he argued basically we couldn't explain the mind in functionalist terms. Now, you have to go do research on that. It's such a complex issue, but one of the reasons he argue this was because he distinguished between two types of intentionality. Again, this intentionality problem comes up, and functionalism is, it's not technically a physicalist theory, but it comes under that category kind of. Now he distinguished between what was it? Intrinsic intentionality and as if intentionality. Now, as if is something which behaves as if it has intentionality but doesn't actually have it. So it basically it would be like a robot or a screen which behaved exactly like I did, but it doesn't actually have the intentionality. It just acts as if it does. Intrinsic intentionality is something which actually has it, which actually has this intentionality, the ability to understand, the ability for its mental states to be about something. Now, what you'll notice here is it's a really vague distinction. It's a really vague definition. Now, one of the reasons for this, and all definitions of intentionality seem to be really vague. Qualia seems fairly well understood in terms of what you mean when you say qualia. It's just what it's like. It's the visual. It's the pain. But intentionality seems really ill-defined, and I think the reason is because you can't separate it from qualia, not clearly at least. Anyway, now, but it's a slight I have run into a slight problem when I was thinking about this, and that slight problem is emotions. Problem with emotion is you can't get emotion from the external world, as in not directly at least. It seems to be completely internal. So that seems to be a completely separate mechanism than visualizing something, or visualizing the thought I like cheese, or visualizing the external world. It seems to be completely different, and I'm not sure how you could explain that in any other terms. Now, again, I'm trying to think about it. If you could explain how the mind, how a physical substance could feel a certain way, because that's essentially what it would be. How a physical substance could feel a certain way, you may be able to explain why, say, sadness, certain emotions, but there does seem to be a subtle distinction. It is essentially that. Yeah, so essentially the cause of these emotions doesn't seem to be directly related to the external world being the physical world, like I already explained. Whereas the cause of certain visual, auditory, taste, touch, smell experiences does seem to be directly related to the external world. There seems to be direct, at least correlation, if not causation, and it's almost certainly causation, even if we don't know how the mind works. Whereas for emotions, it doesn't seem to be that simple. You can feel sad out of the blue. Now, I know there's tons of studies saying, say, sadness, it's a lack of certain chemicals in your brain. But then, even if you explain it in that way, you then, essentially it does become this problem of qualia intentionality again, of how does a physical thing, how do physical chemicals, how do physical electrical signals input or become what it feels like to be a mind? How do you explain that? Then, even if you explain in that way, even if you explained the cause of these things, you still would have to explain how these physical processes, electrical signals, and chemicals turned into certain feelings. And I think that is the main problem of the physicalist approach as a whole. I don't think you need to distinguish it into qualia and intentionality. I think the two are one and the same. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on the mind. Now, again, I don't know it all, and I'm sure I've said something stupid, or I've missed something, or there's some theory which explains this, or maybe there's something in intentionality and qualia which requires the distinction to be made, but I haven't come across that yet. They are distinguished in every textbook I've ever come across, but my instinct is that's a mistake. I don't think they need to be. But yeah, anyway, if you guys did enjoy it, please subscribe if you're not already. And I am going to try and do some more of these. I do enjoy just talking at a camera, because it helps me clarify my thoughts, basically, and it's really helpful me. Anyway, until next time, guys.